Before you skip this video, ask yourself one question. What can $5 really buy for two homeless sisters? It wasn't just an abandoned diner. It became the beginning of the most unbelievable, life-changing story you'll ever hear. Hidden behind a locked door was a secret that had waited more than 20 years for the right family to find it. If they had walked away that day, they would have lost far more than a building. Stay with me, because this inspiring story of hope, second chances, and unexpected kindness builds to a final revelation that has moved millions of people to tears, and it may change the way you see your own life forever. $5. That was all I had left in the entire world. I stared at the worn, crumpled bill resting in my hand, its edges softened by years of passing from one stranger to another, under the harsh fluorescent lights of the old bus terminal in Boise, Idaho. The money looked even smaller than it was. Beside me, my 14-year-old sister, Lily, slept with her head resting against my shoulder. Her breathing wasn't peaceful. Every few seconds came that familiar whistle. Soft. Weak. Terrifying. Most people would never notice it. I noticed every single breath, because I knew exactly what it meant. Her inhaler was almost empty. Maybe one dose remained. 2 if we were lucky. After that, there would be nothing left between my little sister and another asthma attack. Nothing except me. And love alone had never saved anyone from suffocating. The station clock glowed 2:47 a.m. A handful of exhausted travelers slept across rows of cold plastic chairs, hiding beneath jackets and backpacks. Some stared blankly at their phones. Others simply waited for buses that promised somewhere better. No one looked at us. No one asked if we were hungry. No one wondered why 2 teenage girls carried everything they owned inside a pair of torn garbage bags. That was normal. People become experts at ignoring broken things. After 11 years inside the foster care system, I had learned one lesson better than any classroom could ever teach. Being invisible kept you alive. Invisible kids could sneak an extra dinner roll into their pocket. Invisible kids could wear the same sweatshirt for a week without questions. Invisible kids didn't attract attention. But invisibility came with a cruel price. When I turned 17 3 days earlier, the system made me invisible one final time. A caseworker handed me a folder full of paperwork, wished me good luck, and closed the door behind us forever. No apartment, no money, no family, no future, only my little sister. And the impossible responsibility of keeping her alive. Our mother died when I was 6. Lily was only 3. A distracted truck driver ran a red light on a rainy November evening. One text message ended an entire family. The driver survived. Mom didn't. Our father had disappeared long before that. I barely remembered his face. Only the smell of cigarette smoke, motor oil, and the feeling of sitting on his shoulders at a county fair one summer afternoon. A month later, he was gone forever. No grandparents wanted us. No relatives came looking. Over the next 11 years, we were moved from one foster home to another, packed into different bedrooms, different schools, different lives. 7 homes. Countless promises. Not one place ever became home. Yet somehow, we still had each other. And that was enough to keep me fighting. Lily shifted beside me. Even asleep. Her fingers reached for my sleeve as though she was afraid I'd disappear too. I gently brushed a strand of hair away from her face. Her skin looked pale beneath the station lights. Dark circles rested under her eyes. She should have been worrying about homework. Friends, high school dances? Not whether her next breath would come easily. I quietly reached into my backpack and pulled out her rescue inhaler. I shook it. The canister felt almost weightless. One more dose. Maybe. My stomach tightened. The medication cost nearly $200 every month. I had $5 couldn't buy medicine. $5 couldn't buy a hotel room. $5 couldn't even buy enough food for tomorrow. It certainly couldn't buy hope. Or at least, That's what I believed. Trying to distract myself, I unlocked my cracked phone and connected to the station's painfully slow Wi-Fi. Apartment listings, room rentals, job advertisements. Every opportunity demanded something I didn't have. Proof of income, security deposits, credit history, references. It felt as though the world had built invisible walls around people like us. Then, one listing caught my eye, hidden near the bottom of an old county auction website. The thumbnail showed what looked like a forgotten roadside diner sitting alone beside an abandoned highway. Its paint had faded. Its sign leaned sideways. The parking lot was swallowed by weeds. The title read, "Abandoned Roadside Diner, starting bid $5. I blinked. Then read it again. $5. Exactly the amount in my hand. The description was almost unbelievable. Sold as is. Buyer must collect keys in person. Includes building and all remaining contents. No one else had placed a bid. Not one. Any reasonable person would have closed the page immediately. Any sensible person would have assumed it was worthless. Maybe they would have been right. But desperate people don't think like reasonable people. When you've already lost everything, failure doesn't scare you anymore. The only frightening thing, is standing still. I looked down at Lily sleeping beside me. Then back at the screen, my thumb hovered above the bidding button. I had absolutely no idea. That this forgotten diner, abandoned for nearly 2 decades, wasn't waiting for just anyone. It had been waiting. For us, for nearly a full minute. I couldn't move. The screen of my battered phone seemed to blur beneath my eyes as the listing stared back at me. Starting bid $5. An abandoned roadside diner? No competing offers. No hidden fees mentioned. No explanation why a building, even one falling apart, could cost less than a fast food meal. It had to be a mistake. Or worse, a scam. I tapped the listing again. The page loaded painfully slowly over the station's weak Wi-Fi, revealing a few more details. Location Ashwood County, northern Montana. Condition sold as is. Buyer must appear in person to claim the deed and keys. All remaining contents included. That was it. No glossy photographs. No promises. Just 3 faded pictures that looked as though they had been taken years ago. The first showed a lonely diner sitting beside an empty highway. The second revealed cracked windows and peeling white paint. The third captured a rusted neon sign barely hanging onto its frame. No one in their right mind would have wanted it, which explained why no one had bid. I tightened my grip around the $5 bill. $5? The last money I possessed? If I spent it, we wouldn't even have enough for breakfast tomorrow. No bus fare. No emergency cash. Nothing. Luca. Lily's sleepy voice interrupted my thoughts. She slowly opened her eyes and looked up at me. What are you looking at? I hesitated before handing her the phone. She stared at the pictures for several seconds. Then something unexpected happened. She smiled. It wasn't a big smile. It was small. Fragile. But it was real. That's pretty, she whispered. I almost laughed. Pretty. The building looked ready to collapse. Its parking lot had disappeared beneath waist-high weeds. The roof sagged slightly in the middle. One side of the sign had completely fallen away. Yet somehow, she wasn't looking at what it was. She was looking at what it could become. It could be ours, she said quietly. The word settled deep inside me. Ours? I couldn't remember the last time either of us had called anything ours. Not a bedroom. Not a house. Not even a neighborhood. Every foster home had belonged to someone else. Every school had been temporary. Every goodbye had come sooner than expected. We had spent our entire childhood borrowing places that never wanted us to stay. A home. Even a broken one. Sounded impossible. It's probably falling apart, I muttered. So are we? Her answer came so quickly that it stole every argument I had prepared. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. The bus station seemed strangely quiet. Even the buzzing lights overhead faded into the background. I looked around the terminal. A tired janitor slowly pushed his mop across the floor. A young mother rocked a crying baby near the vending machines. An elderly man slept with yesterday's newspaper covering his chest. Everyone was waiting for something. A bus. A paycheck. A second chance. Maybe? So were we. I opened the auction page one last time. The countdown clock showed less than 4 minutes remaining. Still, no other bids. The silence felt almost unnatural, as if the entire world had deliberately overlooked this forgotten place. My thumb hovered above the blue button. I imagined everything that could go wrong. The diner might already be condemned. The roof could collapse. The plumbing could be destroyed. The county might have made a mistake. We could spend our last $5, travel halfway across America, only to discover a pile of rotten lumber. Common sense begged me to walk away. Hope whispered something different. What exactly were we protecting by refusing? $5. A future that didn't exist. Another night sleeping under fluorescent lights. I looked at Lily again. She had started coughing. A dry, painful cough that forced her to reach for the inhaler. She pressed it to her lips. One puff? The tiny canister released only a weak hiss. She frowned. It feels lighter. My heart sank. There wasn't much medication left. Maybe enough for another day. Maybe not. If we stayed here, nothing would change. If we left, everything might. Or everything might fall apart. Either way, standing still was no longer an option. I closed my eyes, took one slow breath, and pressed place bid. For a brief second. Sips. Nothing happened. Then the page refreshed. Congratulations. You are currently the highest bidder. I stared at the message. Still no other offers? 30 seconds. 20. 10. The countdown reached 0. A notification appeared across the top of the screen. Auction closed? Moments later, my phone vibrated. An email arrived. Congratulations. You are the winning bidder. My breathing stopped. Against every law of probability. Against every ounce of common sense. 2 homeless sisters had just become the owners of an abandoned roadside diner nearly 2,000 miles away. I looked at Lily. She looked back at me with wide, hopeful eyes. Does that mean... I nodded slowly. Yeah. We have a place to go? Neither of us realized it then. We thought we had just bought an old building that nobody wanted. We were wrong. Far away in the mountains of Montana. A secret had been waiting in silence for more than 20 years. And somehow, against impossible odds, it had just found the only 2 people it had been waiting for. The confirmation email arrived just after sunrise. I had dozed off sitting upright in one of the cold plastic chairs, my neck stiff, and Lily still leaning against my shoulder. The vibration of my phone startled me awake. For a moment, I forgot where we were. Then I saw the notification. Congratulations, you are the winning bidder. I blinked several times. Still there? I opened the email. Property number 4178, Maple Creek Road Diner. Final sale price $5? Please report to the Ashwood County Clerk's office within 14 days to receive your deed and keys. No one else had bid. Not one person. An entire building. For less than a sandwich. Most people would have considered that a warning. I chose to see it as a miracle. Lily, I whispered, gently shaking her awake. She rubbed her sleepy eyes. What happened? We're going to Montana. She frowned. Why, I couldn't stop smiling. Because I held the phone in front of her. We own a diner. For a second, she simply stared. Then the biggest smile I'd seen in years slowly spread across her face. We really have a home. I hope so. She threw her arms around me so tightly I nearly lost my balance. It wasn't much, Maybe it would turn out to be nothing more than four walls ready to collapse. But for the first time since our mother died, we had somewhere to go. The trip across the country took nearly 3 days. 3 different buses. Endless hours sitting upright. Cheap crackers from vending machines. Refilling water bottles in bus station bathrooms. Neither of us complained. There was nothing to complain about. Every mile carried us farther away from the life that had already abandoned us. As the scenery outside the window slowly changed, so did something inside us. The flat plains became rolling hills. The hills became mountains. Pine forests stretched toward the horizon. Tiny towns appeared for only a few minutes before disappearing behind us. Lily spent most of the journey with her forehead pressed against the glass. "What do you think it'll look like? Our diner." She nodded. I smiled. She had already started calling it ours. "I honestly don't know. Maybe it'll still have booths. Maybe. And one of those spinning pie displays. I hope so." She laughed quietly. The sound caught me off guard. I hadn't heard her laugh like that in years. For just a moment, she sounded like a normal teenager instead of a girl constantly fighting for her next breath. I refused to take that away from her, even if the truth terrified me. Because deep down, I expected disappointment. Buildings sold for $5 usually weren't waiting to be restored. They were waiting to be demolished. Late on the 3rd afternoon, the bus finally pulled into Ashwood, Montana. The town was even smaller than I imagined. One main street, a grocery store, a hardware shop, a tiny post office, an old church. It looked as though time had simply forgotten to keep moving. People slowed down as we walked past. Some openly stared. 2 teenage girls carrying worn duffel bags. It wasn't difficult to guess we didn't belong. Or at least, we didn't look like we belonged. The county clerk's office occupied a small brick building beside the courthouse. A silver-haired woman looked up from behind the counter as we walked inside. "Can I help you?" I carefully placed my printed confirmation email on the desk. "I'm here to claim the deed for the Maple Creek Road diner." She adjusted her glasses, read the paper, then looked back at me. You... "Yes, ma'am." "You bought that place?" "I did." She studied me for several long seconds. "How old are you?" 18. "And your sister?" 14. Another long silence. Finally, she reached into a drawer and removed a thick manila envelope. But instead of handing it over, she held it against her chest. "Young man?" Her voice softened. "Do you know what you're buying?" "I know it's abandoned. It's been empty for almost 20 years. She paused. "Most folks won't even drive past it after dark." A strange chill crept across my shoulders. "Why?" She hesitated. "No one's ever really explained it." She sighed. "People say the old owner locked the doors one afternoon. Onaiv. Thought, and never came back. No bankruptcy. No foreclosure. No fire. No vandalism. He simply disappeared from the business, leaving almost everything inside. The county eventually took possession after years of unpaid taxes. No relatives wanted it. No investors wanted it. No developers wanted it. It simply waited. The woman finally handed me the envelope. Inside were 2 old brass keys, a folded property deed, and one sentence handwritten across the inside flap. "Some doors don't open until the right person arrives." I frowned. "Who wrote this?" The clerk slowly shook her head. "It was already inside when the property was transferred to the county. You've never removed it?" "It never felt right." She smiled sadly. "I suppose now we know who it was meant for." Neither Lily nor I understood what she meant. Not yet. We thanked her and began the 4-mile walk toward our new home. The autumn wind blew across the empty highway as the sun slowly disappeared behind distant mountains. Finally, we saw it. A rusted neon sign leaned crooked beside the road. Most of the letters no longer worked, But one word remained barely visible beneath layers of rust. Home cooking. Beyond the sign stood the diner. Silent. Forgotten. Waiting. And for reasons I couldn't explain, the moment I looked at it, I felt as though it had been expecting us all along. For several seconds, neither of us moved. We simply stood there in the middle of the gravel parking lot, staring at the forgotten diner as the evening breeze whispered through the weeds surrounding the building. "This is really ours," Lily whispered. Her voice trembled somewhere between disbelief and hope. I looked down at the 2 brass keys resting in my palm. They felt surprisingly heavy. Not because of the metal, but because of everything they represented. For the first time in our lives, no one could tell us to pack our bags. No foster parent could decide we had stayed too long. No social worker could move us to another temporary address. Whatever waited behind that front door. It belonged to us. I walked toward the entrance, my heartbeat growing louder with every step. The lock resisted at first, as though it hadn't been touched in years. Then, with one slow turn, it clicked. The old wooden door groaned open. A rush of stale air escaped into the cool evening. Dust floated through beams of golden sunlight pouring in from the windows. The smell hit first. Old wood, coffee that had long ago faded into memory. Grease trapped inside decades-old walls, and beneath it all, something strangely comforting. It didn't smell abandoned. It smelled patient. Lily stepped inside beside me. Neither of us spoke. It felt wrong to interrupt the silence. The dining room looked exactly as though time had stopped. Red vinyl booths lined both walls. Chrome stools still surrounded the long counter. Coffee mugs sat upside down beside an old register. Salt and pepper shakers remained neatly arranged on every table. Even faded menus still rested beneath cracked plastic holders. 15, maybe 20 years had passed. Yet it looked as though someone had simply locked the door after closing time and never returned. "Lucas, oh," Lily finally whispered. "It's beautiful." I smiled. Most people would have seen dust. Broken windows, peeling paint. But Lily saw a possibility. And somehow she made me see it too. I walked behind the counter and opened one of the cabinets. Stacks of ceramic plates were carefully wrapped in yellowed newspaper. The shelves weren't empty. They had been organized, protected, almost, prepared. Whoever left this place hadn't walked away in anger. They had expected someone to return. That thought sent an unexpected chill across my spine. "Luca, come here." Lily's voice echoed from the far end of the diner. She stood beside a framed black and white photograph hanging on the wall. I brushed away years of dust with my sleeve. A young man wearing a military uniform smiled proudly beside the diner. His hand rested against the hood of an old pickup truck. Below the photograph, a small brass plaque read, "Harold Whitmore. Grand opening saw through 1981. "So that's the owner," Lily said softly. I nodded. "He looks proud. He built all this." I found myself staring into the man's eyes. There was something about his expression. Not happiness, not sadness. Determination. As though this place had meant far more to him than simply earning a living. We continued exploring. The kitchen was larger than either of us expected. Industrial ovens. Massive refrigerators. Steel prep tables. Shelves filled with cookware. Everything covered in dust. Yet almost everything remained intact. Lily slowly turned in a circle. "Do you think—" She hesitated. We could reopen it someday. A week earlier, I would have laughed. Now, I wasn't so sure. Maybe because for the first time in years, the future didn't look completely impossible. We'd have to clean for months. She grinned. "So, we don't know how to run a restaurant. We can learn. We don't have any money. We'll figure something out." Her confidence surprised me. Then again, Maybe children survive difficult lives by believing impossible things are still possible. Adults simply forget how. I leaned against the counter and looked around again. The room no longer felt empty. Instead, it felt unfinished, as though someone had pressed pause years ago, waiting for another family to press play. For the first time since our mother died, I stopped thinking about everything we had lost. I started thinking about everything we might still build. A home, a business, a future. Maybe even a place where people like us, people with nowhere else to go, could finally feel welcome. I glanced toward Lily. She was standing in front of the diner windows, smiling as the last rays of sunlight filled the room with warm, golden light. For weeks I had only seen fear in her eyes. Now, I saw something I hadn't recognized in a very long time. Hope. And somehow, that frightened me more than despair, because hope could be taken away. Hope could be broken. I silently promised myself that no matter what happened, I would protect that smile, even if it meant giving up everything else. Neither of us noticed the section of newer flooring hidden behind one of the enormous kitchen refrigerators. Neither of us realized there was a reason this diner had been preserved so carefully, or that beneath our feet. A secret had been waiting in complete silence for nearly 20 years. Within the next few minutes, everything we believed about this forgotten building, and about our own family, was about to change forever. The next morning arrived with an icy silence that wrapped itself around the old diner. For the first time in years, I woke up beneath an actual roof. The faded couch in the former manager's office wasn't comfortable, and Lily had spent the night bundled beneath 3 dusty blankets we found in a storage closet. But neither of us complained. Compared to sleeping in bus terminals, it felt like luxury. Sunlight streamed through the front windows, revealing thousands of tiny dust particles floating through the air like golden snow. The diner looked different in daylight. Less frightening, less forgotten, almost hopeful. Lily wandered into the dining room carrying an old broom nearly as tall as she was. So, she smiled. Where do we start? I laughed quietly. You really want to clean this place? She looked around at the dusty booths and cracked windows. I don't want to clean it. She spun slowly in the middle of the dining room. I want to bring it back. There it was again. That stubborn optimism. The kind that somehow survived everything life had thrown at us. I picked up another broom leaning against the wall. Then let's get to work. For hours, we scrubbed. Dust flew through the air with every sweep. Spiderwebs disappeared from the corners. Broken chairs were stacked outside. The windows slowly transformed from gray to clear as years of dirt washed away beneath buckets of cold water. Little by little, the diner began to breathe again. Around noon, an old pickup truck pulled into the parking lot. Neither of us had expected visitors. The engine shut off. An elderly man climbed out, wearing faded denim overalls and a weathered baseball cap. He stood silently for a moment, staring at the building. Then his eyes settled on us. I'll be, he murmured. You actually came. I exchanged a cautious glance with Lily. Can we help you? The man slowly approached, stopping a few feet from the front steps. My name's Walter Hayes. He extended a rough, calloused hand. I used to drink coffee here every single morning. I shook his hand. I'm Lucas. And this is my sister, Lily. He smiled warmly. So you're the ones who bought it? That's right. Walter looked past us into the diner. For a long moment, he said nothing. His eyes slowly wandered across the booths, the counter, and the old coffee machines. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of memories. I never thought I'd see these lights on again. They don't work yet, Lily admitted. But they will, Walter chuckled. I believe you. Before leaving, he reached into the bed of his truck. I figured you might need these. He handed us 2 large boxes. Inside were cleaning supplies. Buckets, mops, sponges, glass cleaner, trash bags, rubber gloves. Everything we had been trying to manage without. "You don't have to pay me back," he said before I could protest. "I've been waiting a long time to see somebody care about this place again." As he drove away, Lily looked down at the supplies. Why would a stranger do that? I honestly didn't know. Maybe kindness wasn't as extinct as I had believed. Maybe we'd simply forgotten what it looked like. Over the next several days, something unexpected happened. People began stopping. At first, they only slowed their cars to stare. Then a few rolled down their windows. Some waved. Others asked questions. "You really planning to reopen? Need any extra lumber? Mind if I take a look around?" Word traveled through the tiny town faster than either of us expected. Everyone seemed surprised that someone had actually bought the old diner. Even more surprising, 2 teenagers intended to save it. On the 4th afternoon, another truck arrived. Then another, and another. By sunset, nearly a dozen local residents stood inside the diner. One repaired a broken window. Another replaced loose floorboards. A retired electrician offered to inspect the wiring. Someone else brought sandwiches. Another woman arrived carrying homemade soup. No one asked for payment. No one demanded ownership. They simply helped. Lily pulled me aside while everyone worked. "Do you notice something?" "What?" "Nobody's treating us like we're charity." I looked around the room. She was right. No one pitied us. No one spoke to us with forced sympathy. They treated us like neighbors, like partners, like we already belonged. That feeling was completely unfamiliar. I wasn't sure what to do with it. Late that evening, Walter returned carrying a faded cardboard box. I found these in my attic. Inside were dozens of old photographs, newspaper clippings, menus, handwritten recipes, pictures of families celebrating birthdays, children eating ice cream, truck drivers drinking coffee before sunrise. The diner wasn't simply a restaurant. It had once been the heart of the community. Then Walter carefully unfolded one yellowed newspaper article. Across the top was a headline, "Local diner owner vanishes without warning." Below the photograph, the same smiling man we'd seen on the wall, Harold Whitmore. Walter sighed. He wasn't just the owner. He was one of the finest men this town ever knew. "What happened to him?" I asked. Walter slowly shook his head. "No one ever figured that out. He locked the doors one evening. Vanessa Leihas and disappeared. No goodbye. No explanation. No trace. The mystery had haunted the town for almost 20 years. Before leaving, Walter rested his hand on my shoulder. "Lucas?" If Harold chose anyone to find this place again, he looked around the slowly transforming diner. Boy, I think he'd be proud of what you're doing. After everyone had gone home, Lily and I stood quietly in the dining room. The silence felt different now. Not lonely, peaceful. The diner no longer looked abandoned. It looked alive. Not because the repairs were finished. They were far from complete. It looked alive because laughter had returned. Voices had filled the empty rooms again. Hope had finally found its way back inside these walls. Neither of us realized. The greatest gift this place would offer wasn't the building itself. It wasn't even the people beginning to surround us with kindness. It was the truth hidden beneath the kitchen floor. A truth that would soon reveal why Harold Whitmore had never truly abandoned this diner at all. The diner was beginning to feel alive again. Not because every broken window had been replaced. Not because the faded paint had disappeared. And certainly not because we had suddenly become successful. It felt alive because every morning someone new stopped by. Some brought old tools. Some offered advice. Others simply stood in the doorway. smiling as they watched the lights slowly return to a place they had once loved. For the first time in my life, people weren't looking at me with pity. They were looking at me with trust. That frightened me, because trust was something I had never learned how to carry. A week after we arrived, Walter Hayes returned with another surprise. He parked his weathered pickup beside the diner and motioned for me to follow him into the kitchen. "I've been thinking," he said, "about Harold." I looked at the faded photograph hanging near the office door. The smiling man in the picture seemed almost alive now. "What about him?" Walter rested one hand against the old counter. There was one thing that never made sense. "What do you mean?" "When Harold locked this place up, he left everything. The coffee machines, the furniture, the recipes, the cash register." He paused. But Harold wasn't the kind of man who walked away from unfinished business. His words echoed in my mind. I'd noticed the same thing. Nothing inside the diner looked abandoned. Everything looked prepared, as though someone expected to return the following morning. Walter slowly scanned the room. "I think he left something behind." "You mean money?" Walter smiled. "No. I mean answers." That afternoon, curiosity replaced exhaustion. Lily and I searched every corner of the building. We opened cabinets, moved shelves, checked inside storage rooms, read every old receipt we could find. Hours passed. Nothing. As the sun began setting, I leaned against one of the enormous commercial refrigerators in frustration. The heavy machine shifted slightly. I frowned. "That's strange." Lily looked over. "What?" "This thing moved." Together, we pushed with all our strength. The refrigerator slowly scraped across the concrete floor, revealing a section of newer wooden boards underneath. Unlike the rest of the floor, these boards looked newer, almost deliberately replaced. My heartbeat quickened. "Lily, I see it." There was a small metal ring built into one of the boards. I grabbed it. Pulled upward. The wooden panel lifted with a loud creak. Cold air rushed upward from the darkness below. We both froze. A staircase, hidden beneath the kitchen. Walter stared into the opening. "I knew it," he whispered. I knew something wasn't right. I grabbed an old flashlight from a nearby shelf. The beam disappeared into the darkness. Concrete walls, metal railings, a narrow staircase descending underground. Lily reached for my arm. "You think it's safe?" "I don't know." Walter nodded toward the flashlight. "Only one way to find out." The three of us slowly descended. Each wooden step groaned behind us. The air grew colder, drier. Still, when my feet touched the bottom, I swept the flashlight across the room. I stopped breathing. It wasn't a basement. It was a bunker. Rows of metal shelves lined the walls. Canned food, bottled water, medical supplies, blankets, portable generators, boxes carefully labeled by year. Everything perfectly organized. Nothing appeared damaged. It looked as though someone had sealed the room yesterday. Not 20 years ago. Lily whispered in disbelief. "Oh, my God." Walter slowly removed his hat. "I've lived here 68 years. And I never knew this existed." Near the center of the room stood a heavy oak desk. On top rested a leather journal covered with dust. Beside it, a sealed envelope. Across the front, written in careful handwriting, were just 6 words. "For whoever finally finds this place." None of us spoke. The room suddenly felt sacred, as though we had stepped into someone else's unfinished story. I carefully broke the seal. Inside was a handwritten letter. The paper had yellowed with age. The ink remained remarkably clear. The first sentence stopped me cold. "If you're reading this, then fate has finally brought the right family to my door." Family. Walter looked at me. "Read the rest." My hands trembled. "My name is Harold Whitmore." If this diner has become yours, then everything happened exactly as I prayed it would. A chill crawled across my skin. This wasn't a goodbye letter. It felt personal, almost as though Harold had known someone would eventually stand exactly where I was. The letter continued. People will tell you I disappeared. That isn't the truth. I chose to leave because there were people who wanted this land for reasons that had nothing to do with this diner. I couldn't stop them forever, but I could make sure they never received what truly mattered. Walter's face turned pale. What in the world, Doc? I turned another page. Folded inside the journal was an old photograph. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, standing beside Harold outside the diner. She was laughing while holding a slice of pie nearly as large as her face. Something about the child felt strangely familiar. Lily leaned closer. Lucas, doesn't she look... I nodded before she finished. She looked exactly like our mother. Not identical, but close enough to make my heart pound. Same eyes, same smile, same tiny dimple on her left cheek. Walter slowly took the photograph from my hand. For several seconds, he simply stared. Then his eyes widened. I know who she is. You do. He swallowed hard. Her name wasn't in the newspaper. But Harold used to call her Savannah. The room fell silent. Savannah, our mother's name. Walter looked back and forth between the photograph and my face. His voice barely rose above a whisper. I don't think you girls bought this diner by accident. I think... He paused, struggling to believe his own words. Harold was waiting for your family to come home. At that moment, everything I believed about luck, about coincidence, about the impossible $5 auction, began to fall apart, and deep inside Harold's journal, the greatest secret of all was still waiting to be revealed. For several long minutes, none of us spoke. The only sound inside the underground bunker was the faint hum of the emergency ventilation system that had somehow continued working after all these years. I looked back at the photograph. The little girl standing beside Harold Whitmore couldn't have been more than 6 years old. She was laughing with complete innocence, while Harold looked at her the way a proud grandfather looks at someone he loves more than life itself. Walter finally broke the silence. Your mother used to come here almost every afternoon. I slowly lifted my eyes. You knew her? He nodded. Everybody in Ashwood knew Savannah. She lost her parents young. Harold never officially adopted her. But everyone knew she was the daughter he never had. My heart pounded. All my life I had believed our mother had grown up alone. No family, no one who truly cared. Now, everything I thought I knew was changing. Walter gently opened another page of Harold's journal. Several folded letters slipped onto the desk. Each one carried a different date. The final letter had never been opened. Across the front, Harold had written, For Savannah's children. My hands trembled so badly I almost dropped it. Lily reached over and squeezed my hand. Together, we unfolded the letter. If you are reading this, then I was right. Life eventually found a way to bring you home. I don't know your names. I don't know how old you are. I don't even know whether Savannah ever told you about me. But I know one thing with absolute certainty. If you found this place, then you've already survived more than any child ever should. I felt my vision blur. Harold continued. Your mother once saved my life without even realizing it. Years ago, after my wife passed away, I had decided there was nothing left worth living for. Then a lonely little girl walked into this diner every afternoon after school. She smiled at everyone. She washed dishes without being asked. She reminded me that broken hearts can still love again. That little girl gave me back my purpose. Her name was Savannah. A tear rolled down Lily's cheek. I couldn't stop my own... Harold's handwriting became slightly shakier as the letter continued. When Savannah left town to begin her own life, she made me promise one thing. She said, if I ever had something worth leaving behind, I should give it to someone who needed hope more than money. Walter quietly removed his glasses. Even he couldn't hide the tears forming in his eyes. The final pages explained everything. Harold had known wealthy developers wanted to buy the property after a new highway project was announced years earlier. They offered him more money than he had ever imagined. He refused every offer. Instead, he secretly built the underground shelter. Stored supplies, collected journals, protected family photographs, and instructed his attorney to create an unusual condition inside his estate. If no direct heir ever claimed the property, the diner would eventually be auctioned with the lowest possible opening bid. Harold believed something simple. People searching for investments would never notice it. But someone searching for a second chance would. The $5 auction hadn't been a mistake. It had been a test, not of wealth, but of desperation and courage. Walter slowly smiled through his tears. "He found you." I looked around the bunker. "No," I whispered. "I think he made sure we found each other." Over the following months, the diner transformed faster than anyone imagined. The entire town seemed determined to finish what Harold had started decades earlier. Carpenters donated weekends. Electricians repaired every wire. Farmers supplied fresh vegetables. A retired baker taught Lily Harold's famous pie recipes from memory. Children painted flower boxes for the windows. High school students volunteered after class. Every nail hammered into the walls carried a story. Every repaired booth represented another act of kindness. When opening day finally arrived, the parking lot filled before sunrise. Cars stretched down both sides of the highway. People traveled from neighboring counties after hearing the unbelievable story of two sisters who had purchased an abandoned diner for $5. Walter stood beside the entrance wearing his best suit. As the ribbon was handed to Lily and me, he quietly whispered, "This is exactly how Harold would have wanted it." Lily looked at me. Her smile was brighter than I had ever seen. "Ready?" I nodded. Together, we cut the ribbon. The crowd erupted into applause. For a moment, I closed my eyes. I could almost imagine Harold standing somewhere near the old counter. Watching, smiling, finally at peace. That evening, after the last customers had gone home, Lily and I carried 2 slices of fresh apple pie outside. We sat beneath the repaired neon sign. Its lights finally glowed again. Home cooking. The same words that had welcomed travelers for generations. "I wish Mom could see this," Lily whispered. I looked toward the stars. "I think she can." The cool Montana wind carried the scent of pine trees across the quiet highway. For the first time in my life, silence didn't feel lonely. It felt like home. I reached into my pocket and unfolded the same $5 bill I had kept ever since winning the auction. Not the one we spent. Another $5 bill I carried to remind myself where everything had begun. I smiled. $5 had never changed our lives. One man's kindness had, one little girl's compassion had, and one impossible act of faith had echoed across 2 generations until it finally reached us. Sometimes people believe the greatest inheritances are measured in money. They're wrong. The greatest inheritance is hope passed from one broken heart to another, and because one lonely man chose to believe that kindness could outlive him, 2 forgotten sisters finally found what they had been searching for their entire lives. Not a diner, not an inheritance, not even a miracle. They found a place where they truly belonged. And from that day forward, no matter where life would lead them, they would never again have to wonder what it felt like to come home. If there's one lesson this journey taught me, it's this. Life doesn't always change because of one extraordinary moment. Sometimes, it changes because someone chooses to show kindness when they have no reason to. For years, Lily and I believed the world had forgotten us. We thought being poor meant we had nothing to offer. We believed that people like us were simply expected to survive, not to dream. We were wrong. The greatest gift we ever received wasn't an old diner. It wasn't a hidden bunker. It wasn't even the chance to own a business. The greatest gift was discovering that one person's compassion can continue changing lives long after they're gone. Harold Whitmore never met us. He never knew our names. He never saw the adults we would become. Yet decades before we arrived, he chose hope over profit. He believed that someday, someone who desperately needed a second chance would walk through those doors. Because of that decision, 2 frightened sisters found a home. An abandoned building became the heart of a community once again. And an entire town remembered that kindness is contagious. The truth is, every one of us leaves something behind. Maybe it isn't a business. Maybe it isn't money. Maybe it isn't even something anyone can hold in their hands. Sometimes the most valuable inheritance is the way we treat people. A word of encouragement. A helping hand. A meal shared with someone who's struggling. A moment of patience. A single act of generosity. Those small choices have a way of traveling farther than we ever imagine. Years from now, someone you've never met may still be living a better life because of a kindness you almost didn't give. So never underestimate the impact of choosing compassion over convenience. You may never know whose future you're changing, but that doesn't make your kindness any less powerful. Call to action. If this story touched your heart, take a moment today to reach out to someone who may be silently struggling. Sometimes a single conversation, a small act of kindness, or even a few encouraging words can become the turning point in someone else's life. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another inspiring story about hope, resilience, and the extraordinary power of ordinary people. Finally, I'd love to hear from you. If you had only $5 left in the world, would you have taken the same risk? Or would you have chosen a different path? Share your answer in the comments below. Your story might inspire someone else who's searching for hope today.